On the chilly winter afternoon of July 25, 1973, the Adelaide Oval was alive with excitement and anticipation. Nestled in the heart of South Australia's capital city, the stadium had long been a beloved gathering place for sports fans and families alike. On this particular day, the stands brimmed with nearly 24,000 spectators who had come to watch a fiercely contested Australian rules football match. The atmosphere was electric, the roar of the crowd echoing across the oval as supporters cheered on their favorite teams with fervor and passion. Among the bustling crowd were two young girls who had traveled to the stadium with their families. Joanne Ratcliffe, a bright and cheerful 9-year-old with an infectious smile, and Kirste Gordon, a sweet and curious 7-year-old who was Joanne's close friend. The two girls were inseparable companions who had spent countless weekends playing together, sharing secrets and dreams. For them, the match promised a day of fun and adventure, surrounded by the hum of excited fans and the thrill of the game. Joanne was known to her family as an intelligent and lively child. She loved school, had a creative imagination, and was often the one to initiate games and stories among her friends. Kirste, while younger and more reserved, had a gentle spirit and a keen curiosity about the world around her. The girls had grown up in Adelaide's suburbs and were comfortable in each other's company, their friendship marked by laughter and trust. As the game progressed, Joanne and Kirste sat with their parents and relatives in one of the stands, eagerly watching the players as they dashed across the grass. The crisp winter air was punctuated by the cheers of the crowd, the referee's whistle, and the sounds of the marching band playing familiar tunes. The smell of freshly cut grass mixed with hot pies and coffee from nearby vendors created a nostalgic scene, one typical of an Australian football match in the early 1970s. But as the first half drew to a close, the atmosphere began to shift. Halftime at the Adelaide Oval was known as a lively and sometimes chaotic period. Spectators stood up from their seats to stretch their legs, visit the refreshment stalls, or socialize with friends. The aisles became crowded with people weaving to the rows of seats, the noise swelling with conversations, footsteps, and the excited chatter of children. In this maelstrom of movement, Joanne and Kirste disappeared. No one knows for certain exactly what happened in those crucial minutes. The stadium was packed, the crowd thick and noisy, making it easy for two small girls to slip away unnoticed. Perhaps they were drawn to a stall selling sweets or distracted by the lively activities around them. Perhaps they wandered hand in hand, caught up in excitement and unfamiliar with how quickly the crowd could swallow them whole. What is clear is that when their families realized the girls were missing, panic set in immediately. Voices grew louder as frantic calls rang out through the stands. Relatives and stadium staff began searching frantically, scanning the sea of faces for any sign of the two young girls. The stadium was vast, with many exits, tunnels, and corners, a maze for even the most alert eyes. Despite the desperate efforts, no trace of Joanne or Kirste was found within the stadium. Witnesses would later recall vague sightings. Two children near the northern end, near one of the gates, or near the outer fences, but no one confirmed exactly when or how the girls vanished from sight. Some recalled seeing a man near where the girls were last seen, but descriptions were unclear and inconsistent. The police were quickly notified, and the stadium was locked down as a thorough search was launched. Officers, volunteers, and family members spread out to comb the stadium and the surrounding area. Loudspeakers announced the missing children, urging anyone with information to come forward. Outside the stadium, the streets buzzed with activity as local residents heard the news. Volunteers joined in the search, scouring nearby parks, alleyways, and public transport stops. Flyers with photographs of Joanne and Kirste were printed and distributed, plastered on walls, lampposts, and shop windows. The entire city of Adelaide was gripped by a mixture of fear, hope, and confusion. How could two young girls vanish so completely in the middle of thousands of people? It was a question that haunted everyone involved, from the families desperate for answers to the police struggling against a baffling lack of clues. As hours turned into days, the sense of urgency only deepened. The community rallied together, holding vigils and prayer meetings, lighting candles in hopes that the girls might be found safe. News media picked up the story, broadcasting the heartbreaking tale across Australia. Yet despite the relentless search efforts and public outcry, Joanne and Kirste remained missing. The disappearance exposed the vulnerabilities of children in crowded public places, sparking discussions on safety, supervision, and emergency response. Parents everywhere felt the chill of uncertainty. If two girls could vanish so easily in a busy stadium, what did that say about the world they lived in? For Joanne and Kirste's families, the days that followed were a torment of hope and despair. Every phone call, every knock on the door brought the fear of bad news. Yet no breakthrough came. The girls' absence was a wound that would never fully heal. The story of their disappearance would go on to become one of Australia's most haunting unsolved mysteries, a reminder of the fragility of innocence and the dark unknowns that sometimes lurk in the brightest places. In the days immediately following the disappearance of Joanne Ratcliffe and Kirste Gordon, Adelaide found itself gripped by an unsettling silence. The joy and excitement of that football match on July 25th, 1973, had dissolved into something cold and ominous, a collective fear that perhaps something far more sinister had occurred beneath everyone's noses. The search that had started in a frenzy within the stadium had now stretched out into the city, sprawling across suburbs, highways, and rural roads like a shadow spreading over the landscape. Police quickly ramped up their investigation. This wasn't just a case of two girls getting lost. The more time passed, the clearer it became. This was likely an abduction. And if that was true, then every hour that passed made it less likely that the girls would be found unharmed. Dozens of detectives were assigned to the case. Roadblocks were set up, nearby rivers and creeks were searched, and dogs were brought in to try to pick up a scent. The story dominated the headlines. Local television and radio ran updates every hour. People everywhere kept their eyes peeled, hoping for a glimpse, a clue, anything. Soon, witness reports began to trickle in. One woman claimed to have seen two young girls who matched the descriptions of Joanne and Kirste being led away from the stadium by a man. She described him as between 40 and 45 years old, balding, scruffy-looking, wearing a brown suit or jacket. The girls, she said, looked confused, not hysterical, but not relaxed either. One of them, possibly Joanne, seemed distressed and was tugging at the man's arm. This account was chilling, but it was just one among many. Other witnesses claimed they had seen the same man trying to coax children near the stadium exits in the past. Some even suggested he had been spotted at earlier football games, always alone, always lingering in the areas where families sat. But no one had ever thought much of it, until now. The man soon became the central focus of the investigation. Artist sketches were drawn based on descriptions, and a massive effort was launched to identify him. Police combed through records, questioned known offenders, and visited nearby mental health institutions. They canvassed local hotels, motels, boarding houses, any place where a transient stranger might hide. Yet despite the scope of the investigation, the man remained a ghost. Some leads seemed promising. A man matching the suspect description was seen with two little girls near a railway line a few hours after the game. Another witness swore she saw a similar man pushing two distressed girls into a car near a public restroom. But when investigators followed up, there was nothing concrete. No fingerprints, no belongings, no CCTV footage. Not that such technology was widely available in 1973. Everything depended on human memory, and memory, as investigators knew too well, can be unreliable. As the days turned into weeks and then months, theories began to swirl. Some believed the girls had been taken by someone they knew. Others feared a predator was on the loose, someone who would use the chaos of the football match as a perfect cover. The media didn't help. Sensational headlines stirred the public's imagination, and the more time passed, the more people began to believe the worst. For the Ratcliffe and Gordon families, the weight was unbearable. Joanne's parents, Leslie and Kathleen, were devastated. They had brought their daughter to a football match, a simple outing, and now she was gone. Kirste's parents, Jim and Christine Gordon, had placed their trust in family friends, never imagining that a day of fun would turn into a lifelong nightmare. Both families participated in media appeals. They appeared on news broadcasts, spoke to reporters, and pleaded for the public's help. They believed, deep down, that someone out there knew something. Someone had seen the girls. Someone had seen the man. But the silence remained unbroken. The case began to draw comparisons to another infamous Adelaide mystery, the Beaumont children disappearance of 1966. In that case, 3 siblings had vanished from Glenelg Beach without a trace. Like Joanne and Kirste, they had last been seen with a man described as friendly but unfamiliar. That case had haunted Australia for years and had never been solved. Now, people began to wonder, could the same person be responsible? Some experts believed so. The similarities were striking. 2 girls, broad daylight, a crowded public area, vague witness sightings of a man. Could this be the work of a serial predator who had struck before? The idea was horrifying, but it couldn't be ignored. Over time, the case grew cold. Investigators were rotated off the file. New crimes took precedence. But the families never gave up. They continued to hope, to fight, and to demand answers. Kathleen Ratcliffe, in particular, became a tireless advocate for child safety and missing persons. She spoke at community events, pushed for better support for families, and insisted the case not be forgotten. Years passed, then decades, and still nothing. But in the background, the whispers never stopped. There were rumors, unconfirmed sightings, anonymous letters. Some claimed the girls had been taken interstate. Others believed they had been murdered and buried in an unknown grave. One chilling lead came in the late 1980s, when a man incarcerated in South Australia claimed to have information. He said he had known someone who had confessed to the crime. Investigators took it seriously, and an intensive inquiry was launched. But in the end, it led nowhere. The informant had no evidence. The alleged confessor was dead. The trail once again went cold. And then, decades later, a new name surfaced: Bevan Spencer Von Einem. Von Einem was convicted murderer, serving life for the brutal killing of 15-year-old Richard Kelvin in 1983, when a series of crimes attributed to a shadowy group rumored to be involved in the abduction and abuse of young boys in Adelaide. Though his known victims were all male and older than Joanne and Kirste, some detectives began to wonder if Von Einem could also be linked to their case. Perhaps he had acted alone, or perhaps he was part of a network far more dangerous than anyone had realized. But again, there was no concrete evidence to tie him to the girl's disappearance. Investigators interviewed him. He denied everything. The questions lingered unanswered. What happened to Joanne Ratcliffe and Kirste Gordon after they walked out of the stadium that day? Were they taken by a predator? Did they try to run? Were they alive for days, weeks, or were their lives taken almost immediately? These questions would echo through the years, growing heavier with time. By the early 2000s, new hope emerged. Cold case units began reviewing old files. Modern forensic techniques, DNA analysis, digital archiving, behavioral profiling, gave investigators new tools to work with. Witness reports were reevaluated. Locations were re-examined. New sketches were made using age progression technology. But nothing definitive emerged. And yet, something had changed. The story of Joanne and Kirste had become more than a tragedy. It had become a call to action, a reminder that justice delayed should never be justice denied, a symbol of how important it is to remember, to ask questions, to demand answers, because sometimes the smallest clue, long buried, can open the door to truth. Years turn into decades, but the story of Joanne Ratcliffe and Kirste Gordon never truly faded. Their disappearance remained one of Australia's most heart-wrenching mysteries, not just because of the tragedy, but because of the silence that followed. A city had watched them vanish. A nation had searched. But no one, not even after half a century, could answer one haunting question. What really happened that day? Over the years, several theories have emerged, each one chilling, each one incomplete. One of the most persistent theories connects the case to the disappearance of the Beaumont children, Jane, Arna, and Grant, who vanished from Glenelg Beach just 7 years before Joanne and Kirste. The parallels were hard to ignore. Both incidents occurred in public places during daylight hours. Both involved more than one child. And in both cases, witnesses described a man with the children, always described as calm, possibly familiar to them, but never identified. Some detectives and criminologists have long believed that the same predator could have been behind both disappearances. They pointed to similarities in the way the children seemed to leave willingly, without a struggle, and how quickly the trail went cold. But again, no evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no definitive link ever proved this theory. As the years passed, attention turned toward another suspect, one far more specific: Bevan Spencer Von Einem. Von Einem was convicted in 1984 of the murder of Richard Kelvin, a teenage boy abducted in Adelaide, drugged, and subjected to unspeakable abuse before his death. He was also suspected in the so-called family murders, a series of killings of young men in the late 1970s and early 80s. Von Einem was known to have a disturbing pattern targeting vulnerable youth, drugging them, and keeping them captive for days before killing them. Though Joanne and Kirsten fit his usual profile, they were younger, female, and disappeared in 1973. Long before his known crime, some believed he may have been involved. Perhaps, they speculated, he didn't act alone. Perhaps there were others. Perhaps the family was bigger, darker, and more organized than anyone knew. Police did question Von Einem. He denied involvement, and again no hard evidence ever connected him to the girls. There was also the haunting tip from a prison inmate in the late 1980s, a man who claimed a fellow inmate had confessed to killing the girls and burying their bodies in an isolated area. Investigators followed the lead. A massive dig was even carried out on a property outside Adelaide, but no remains were found. Later, in the early 2000s, police received another tip. Someone reported seeing a man matching the original sketch in a rural area with 2 crying girls on the day of the disappearance. A woman swore she had seen the man near a public toilet with the children, one of them trying to escape. But again, it led to nothing. Too much time had passed. Memories blurred. The trail had long gone cold. Even as technology improved with DNA testing, facial recognition, and data digitization, there was no break. Files were digitized, sketches were updated, and cold case units were assigned. But the case remained elusive. It is possible, heartbreakingly possible, that whoever took Joanne and Kirste is now dead, that the secret of their fate was buried along with them. But for the families and for the people of Australia, the story refuses to die. In 2019, a new development gave brief hope. South Australia police increased the reward for information on the case to $1 million, one of the largest ever offered in the country. The hope was that after so many years, maybe someone once afraid to speak, might finally come forward. Someone might remember something. A neighbor, a friend, a relative of someone long suspected. Because sometimes the passage of time can break silence. Sometimes the burden of truth becomes too heavy to carry. And in 2023, on the 50th anniversary of the girl's disappearance, tributes poured in from around the country. Newspapers reprinted the story. Journalists re-examined the timeline. Podcasts, documentaries, and YouTube creators like you, and I joined the effort to make sure the world didn't forget Joanne and Kirste. And we shouldn't forget them. They were real girls with real lives who mattered. Joanne Ratcliffe was 11, mature for her age, protective, thoughtful. She wanted to be a teacher one day. Kirste Gordon was just 4, playful, giggly, full of life. She loved dolls and held Joanne's hand like a little sister. They vanished in front of thousands of people, in a country that was supposed to be safe. Their families, their mothers and fathers, siblings, grandparents were left with no graves to visit, no truth to hold on to, just a memory of 2 smiling girls and a void that never closed. Right now, as you watch this, we want to show you something real. Here is a rare photo of Joanne Ratcliffe and Kirste Gordon taken before that tragic day in 1973. They were more than just names and a mystery. They were children taken too soon and still waiting for justice. So we ask you, not just as viewers, but as fellow humans, if you know something, anything, no matter how small, please come forward. Let these families have answers. Let the silence end. And if you found this story as haunting as we did, help us keep their memory alive. Don't forget to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel AI Alvantis, where we bring you stories that the world should never forget. Because behind every mystery, there's a voice waiting to be heard. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and stay searching.